and welcome to the latest of my deep dive specials. This one into Valentine's Day of the 14th of February 2022. Now I'm going to explore a little bit about the more historical elements of Valentine's Day. Underneath this video you can click on a link and read a much more in-depth historical context of what Valentine's Day is about and how it's developed. But what I want to talk about is really relationships and what this event means in this modern world that we live in, because not everyone's in a relationship, and the commercialization of Valentine's Day as it is means that if you're not in a tie, there can be a sense of alienation or a sense of distance from this mythical, amazing event where all these people are staring into each other's eyes adoringly, sharing a lovely glass of claret or champagne and a meal deal from Marks and Spencer's. But what is the reality of relating these days? Because we all need to relate, whether it's to the person who answers our call at a call centre, to the person who delivers our groceries, to people in our family or our neighbours. Relating is going on all the time. We don't necessarily have to be in a relationship for that process to be very active in our lives. And also, it's important to have a good relationship with ourselves. So I'm going to explore quite a few of these strands. So whatever your status, if you're very much a singleton, I was for many years, or you're someone who is in a relationship, it may have its moments, it may bump along the bottom, but it may be something that you're highly invested in. It may be a tie that actually you're not very happy in. Or whether you're someone who'd like to meet someone, I hope that this presentation will give you something that you can relate to. And through the astrology of the event, help you to see how we are all going to be influenced by this Valentine's return, this solar return for Valentine's Day on the 14th. Now, if you're new to my channel, I'd be honoured if you would subscribe. Please click or tap on the bell notification symbol. Also, if you'd like to get your free daily written or even love horoscope fired to your device each morning, click beneath this video and you can sign up and get this totally for free. I've been writing these for about 25 years, so many moons, and it'd be great to have you with me. And finally, if you don't know so much about your natal horoscope, so you might know what your sun is or what your ascendant is or your moon, but if you don't know about other critical positions in your horoscope, if you order your personal horoscope below with my special offer, you can find out where all the planets are located, which signs they're in, but also which houses they're in, and that is very, very important. For example, if you've got Mars in the 7th house, you're going to be someone who's quite competitive. Mars in the 1st, someone who's a go-getter, whatever zodiac sign they are in. And if you get that, you get 30% off, and you also get a 12-month forecast as well. Please see the link beneath this video. So Valentine's Day is said to celebrate happy relationships, but that's the thing I want to push back against. Because not everybody is in a happy relationship, even if they're in a relationship. And sometimes the corny imagery that goes with this whole message, as I said before, can be very alienating for a lot of people. But the concept of relating, within the word relationships, is very important for all of us at all times. So what I want to do to guide you through this event is to explain what I feel the principles of relating are about in astrology. I'm then going to share with you the event chart for this particular Valentine's Day to see what energy is being manifested. I'm then going to go on to share with you each of the 12 zodiac signs and what they can expect from this particular Valentine's Day. But you can watch this in terms of your sun or your ascendant. The choice is yours. So what are the issues about relating in astrology? Well, there's a lot of emphasis that's put on the sun, rightly, because that's the core of our being and our potential. The ascendant is how we appear on the eastern horizon on the day we're born. But that doesn't necessarily work in simpatico with our sun. So some people can actually have an ascendant which squares their sun, squares their midheaven, and that means that they don't necessarily come across to other people as they actually feel that they are. So the concept of relating from our personal viewpoint appears to be prompted by the first house. So how we connect to the world at large, the ascendant. But the critical point in astrology around relationships themselves is the 7th house cusp, the opposite of the first house. And that often, it seems to me, gets forgotten, particularly on YouTube. So the descendant is the critical point, because that's what we need to balance the ascendant. And it's the opposite, because the whole point of relating is we're trying to find a midpoint between our needs and our perspective, the first house, and the perspectives and outlook of the person we're connecting to. If we achieve that pivot in a really positive way, we have a very democratic relationship which is based on give and take, compromises, collaboration, cooperation, and most of all listening, which seems to be something of a dying art. So this all comes from the importance of the 7th house cusp. Now the 7th house cusp could, if we have Saturn moving across it, be a point when we forge a very important relationship with someone. Or it can be when a relationship makes way. And that can be true of Pluto as well. They're the two strategic planets. But of course, Venus is known as the planet of relating because of its rulership of the sign of Libra. But it also is the ruler of Taurus. So what does that mean? Well, that's more about the sensual connection in relationships, and it's also more about celebrating events like Valentine's Day with good food and wine, and perhaps with some cosy snuggles and cuddles. But that descendant, that 7th house energy, is very much in keeping with that Libran vibe. So if we understand how to integrate our first house and how we're linking with the world, but understand how other people perceive us, we're a long way along the path of actually forging better relationships with other people of all kinds. So on the screen now, I'm showing you the event chart for this year's Valentine's Day on Universal Central Time. And the Ascendant is just under 8 degrees in Scorpio. So Scorpio is an intense energy. It scrutinizes things because Scorpio has an ability to get beneath the surface. But of course its ruler is Mars, traditionally, very much about the more sexual side of relating. But its modern ruler is Pluto, very much about desire and also about transformations. But on the other side of the heavens, therefore, in this particular event, the Descendant is Taurus. And Taurus energy is very much about stability. It's a fixed sign like Scorpio, but it really appreciates having firm foundations. It's the second zodiac sign. It's ruled by Venus, but it gives us a desire to know what values we are guided by. So if we're trying to relate to someone with very different values to us on this particular event, that is going to be a challenge in itself. But you can see just above the 7th house line is the sun and the moon, two little images, and that's the midpoint of the sun, which is the core of our being, and this event obviously is Aquarius on the 14th of February at 25 degrees. But the moon, when this event strikes, is at 24 degrees in Cancer, in dignity in its home zone. So the midpoint between the two is at 9 degrees Taurus. So this is going to be a very Tauran event, because the balance, this is nothing to do with gender, sexuality, orientation whatsoever. The balance of the moon, which is receptive, and the sun, which is drive, is based on Taurus. So this event is very Taurian. So if we can enjoy good food and good wine, and we can relate to people in any relationship at all who have values that we really respect, that's a great thing to do. But look, just above that midpoint is Uranus. And Uranus is the planet of truth, but it's also the planet of restlessness. So if a relationship has been struggling a little bit, and you're using this event in order to try to reinvigorate or respark the magic between you and yours, well, there is something that's going to really aid that, because Jupiter, the planet of growth, is actually in the sign of Pisces, which it traditionally rules, and that's forging a gorgeous link with the midpoint and also with Uranus. But it may require a heart-to-heart, some real home truths being expressed. Now, of course, a Scorpio ascendant can be quite private, so there may be a need to be a bit more upfront about how we feel about all sorts of relationships for us all, in order for us to gain from this event. But Uranus does say that if there is a relationship that just isn't working, we don't get that relating point, we don't reach that tipping point in an equilibrious way, we feel that it's all give and not a lot of get, some people will perhaps use this event, if not straight away, as a marker to leave something that isn't working. Now, if we look at the chart, you can see that there's an image just above Mars on the second house cusp, and that's Cupido, and that's really what we desire. That's the kind of ideal partner, if you like, and in the sign of Capricorn, so we're wanting something that's quite stable. Now, that Cupido actually forges a beautiful link with the Descendant, a Trine. So if you are going on a date and it's someone who's very courteous, perhaps got some old world values, that can be very, very useful. You know, whether it's, you know, they're very polite and courteous and acknowledging to your viewpoint, and there's no hassle at all about carving up the bill between you, you could be on to a winner. But you can also see then beyond that, you've got Mars, the planet of passion and desire, which is exalted in Capricorn, can actually be really quite sultry here, but that's alongside Venus. That combination is a lovely combination. It's very sexual, but in the sign of Capricorn, it probably points towards a more material appreciation. So if you're lucky enough to like someone, be attracted to someone, be involved with someone who's sensible with resources, that's going to be another building brick towards a successful connection. Not necessarily a partnership, but just another step of the connection. But then in between Venus and Pluto, we have Pan. Now, Pan is an asteroid very much to do with lust, and having it here in this third house energy means that we're lusting, I think, for a degree of mental stimulation, but it's actually opposite the moon. So the moon in the ninth house in Cancer is really wanting us to find the truth in our relationships, because the ninth house is the higher principles of communication. So any relationship that's not predicated on honesty can be under pressure with that particular connection. Also, you can see that Pluto is in an opposition with the moon as well. If a relationship is seriously out of kilter, is not very well aligned, this can lead to very polar emotions that could affect this event. So it could be going along swimmingly well, and suddenly there can be some kind of discussion, some words or some dialogue that sparks a reaction that destabilizes the whole situation. But Mercury is pretty close to Pluto, so our abilities to get to the bottom of what situations are about is definitely aided by that combination. Then you can see the next image is Juno, another asteroid, which is in the democratic sign of Aquarius, so that brings a bit of detachment to the piece. But then, of course, we have Saturn, the planet of structure, but also of restriction. Now, it's not that close to the Sun, so I don't think it's going to be critical around the Sun, but it is close to the fourth house cusp, and it is opposite the 10th house cusp, which has Leo there. So the chances are on this event, not only do we want earthy stability, a wonderful meal and food, we also want someone that we could admire, someone that we can really feel has something about them that is that we can look up to in some way. Not saying put them on a pedestal, but just have a respect for how they lived their life in the public eye. But Saturn on the fourth house is more challenging. So, you know, if a relationship lacks that emotional connectivity, which is so important, however much we fancy someone, if we don't have that emotional connection, it won't endure. So that's another point on this particular event that could be critical. Then you can see at 16 degrees we've got Eros, which is the planet of marriage, really, I feel. In my own chart, I have Eros in Capricorn, and my wife actually has exactly the same degree as me. So in Capricorn, that's very much to do with sort of the old world manners, I feel. In the sign of Pisces, it's much more fluid, but it's in the 4th house. It's quite sentimental, and you can see it's relatively close to Neptune. So I would say that we could find ourselves feeling very nostalgic if we're not in a relationship and we're thinking about someone we used to be involved with. That could make us think a lot about the magic that used to be applied to that relationship. So you can see there's so many different components to how we can read this event. And then in the 8th house, up there on the top right hand corner is Black Moon Lilith. This is all to do with our sort of forbidden fruit, the more hidden desires and yearnings that we may have. And people seem to be embracing Black Moon Lilith, not necessarily because they know about astrology, but there's a lot more openness about the different types of relationships people have these days. They're not so formulatic in terms of, you know, it has to be man and wife, or man and man, or wife and wife. There are so many different variations, but then it can be that people have threesomes and foursomes, and all these different things are much more fluid these days than they've ever been before, it seems. Certainly people are much more at ease with sharing their more desires in this way. And in the sign of Gemini, Black Moon Lilith is quite flirty, but it is definitely intrigued by sex. So a bit of a fling could be possible with Black Moon Lilith in the 8th house. A quick fix of intimacy, but then Gemini being very fleeting, even flirty, may see a situation move on quite quickly, particularly with Eros and Neptune in a square to Black Moon Lilith. So if you're looking for something that's much more meaningful, much more emotional, and much more stable, just be aware that with Uranus on the 7th house cusp, in conjunction with the midpoint, and Black Moon Lilith in a square with Neptune and Eros, and Pan in an opposition along with Pluto to the Moon, there is the potential for instability, but there's also the potential for a lovely evening. It could be really fresh, it could be really spontaneous, but whether it will be rooted for those meeting for the first time in a longer term relationship, the jury would be out. But the desire for intimacy is certainly very, very strong in this chart. But it all comes through the position of, in order, Cupido, Mars, Venus, obviously Pan. We also have Juno. We also have Eros. We also have Black Moon Lilith, but most importantly of all, so with Uranus on that 7th house cusp, close to the midpoint, this can give us the desire for sudden connections, which involve sensuality, good food, good wine, all the things that we think of Valentine's Day, but also Uranus can give us a sudden desire to separate from something that isn't working. If we feel it's not truthful, or we don't feel that our need to maintain our boundaries is being respected in the way that's important to us. So please stay with me. I'm going to go through each of the zodiac signs to give you a flavour of what you can expect. Now Aries, because the midpoint for you is in your 2nd house, well, if you can get to relish that good food and good wine, you're certainly going to be happy. But in general, your relationships at the moment, and based on this event, need to also have a great element of friendship. And although there is a massive amount of emphasis in this particular Valentine's Day based on what you're doing in terms of your wider aspirations in life, I wouldn't be guided too much if you encounter someone for the first time by what they do for a living. If someone is stable in what they do and they're meaningful about it and sincere, I would take that as being a very positive sign. Don't be guided only by someone's material success, because you could miss out on recognizing someone who could be really good for you. But a sudden invitational date is possible on this particular Valentine's Day. But if you're in an ongoing relationship, I feel there needs to be a fair balance of the give and take around the financial structure of the relationship. And if your values do not align, this may be something that you need to talk about. But that could be with a family member, it could be with a friend, it could be with a colleague. So in general, your relationships at the moment need not be too much based on the material plane in terms of what someone might do for a living. But if you're in a relationship, you'll definitely need some kind of sense that your values are well aligned and there's a fairness around the financial situation between you. Now, Taurus, this is a time when actually you can be very authentically yourself, and actually that can turn out to be incredibly exciting. If you are single, yes, an invitation could come from absolutely nowhere. But if it doesn't, just take a lot of heart that the way things are at the moment with Uranus's progress through your sign is that every single day Uranus stays with you. It's pushing you to get in touch with the person you really need to be. Not the person you used to be, not the person you used to aspire to be, the person you are now. You're being asked to strip away all that's non-essential and just get down to what makes you plainly you. And that wonderful, exciting energy of your ruler Venus combining with Mars and also Pan and also Mercury and also Pluto, all in your 9th house, is really pushing you to shake things up. And even if you're someone who has in the past been quite cautious about making the first move around any kind of relationship or interest or hobby, this is an opportunity now for you to be much more dynamic in your approach to all sorts of interests and how you relate to others. Now, Gemini, for you, having this midpoint in your 12th house is quite psychological. Of course, the sun itself is in the 9th house, very much to do with widening your boundaries. But I think if you are really going to connect with someone well at this time, it needs to be someone that you feel safe with, someone that you feel secure with. Your ability to get along with lots of different types of people is absolutely, a given. But even if you buzz around and have laughs and it's flirty, I think what you're looking for at this present time is something much deeper and much more meaningful. And sometimes that comes from even unspoken communication. So listen to your sixth sense if there is someone that you're interested in, because it's unlikely to fail you. But if you are fortunate enough to be in a good relationship, I think this could turn out to be quite a raunchy Valentine's Day. Now, Cancer, for you having the midpoint and also Uranus close to it in your 11th house means that perhaps the type of people that are interested in you at the moment is very different to those that have captured your imagination in the past. But there's a yearning within you at the moment, a deep yearning to have a much more fulfilling relationship in your world. Now, it doesn't matter who it's with, whether it's with friends, colleagues, any interest you have, the people you connect with, it has to really somehow move you. If you lack that, there could be a part of you that would just prefer to be free and keep the space open for someone who may come along who really does have that kind of electric, galvanizing and fascinating energy that would really make your pulse race. So if you're not seeing anyone this Valentine's Day, don't be hung up about it, because the program you're on is really a good program, because you're waiting for someone to emerge, and you can set your intentions to that, who really, really is going to excite you, and good for you if so. Now, Leo, of course, you continue to have Saturn in your 7th house. So relationships may have been an area that you've been asking yourself some important questions, really since March the 22nd, 2020 through to the 2nd of August 20, then again from 17th of December 20 through till now. Maybe someone has made way in your situation, or your way of relating has become more serious. You're more aware of what you will or won't put up with. And that's a really good process, but it may have been a painful process. But the midpoint in this chart is in your 10th house. So the chances are you could meet someone in a public situation through your work. It could be a colleague, it could be someone older or younger than you that could come into your world over the next few years. So even if on this particular event you find yourself not in a relationship, the great thing you can take from it is that you're free. You know, no one's blocking up the situation vacant to be that person beside you. But if you are in a relationship which is bumping along the bottom a little bit, it may be because that person doesn't understand quite as much as you want the type of role in life that you want for yourself, but maybe jointly in the relationship for one another. Because I think that part of your situation is quite fluid, and their point of view may be, well, are you quite sure about what you want too? So I think things are in a bit of a state of flux for you, to be honest, and you could get some advice, and advice can come in from people, especially from, you know, sort of those sages that we all have in our lives that we really think a lot of. But remember to be guided by your instincts most of all. However caring someone is, they won't necessarily see it from your perspective. But I think Saturn generally is asking you to take relationships very seriously and to not give away your affections to the wrong person. And if you are in a relationship which isn't working, to have the courage to confront that fact that maybe it doesn't have a long-term future for you. And that is only something that you could assess. Now, Virgo, of course, this cluster of energy in the sign of Capricorn is absolutely wonderful in terms of your neat charisma, and all that energy in your sister earth sign of Virgo is very much about being spontaneous, shaking things up. You've been someone who has been very dutiful for many years. You've done a lot for other people. I want you to be thinking more about what you need to do for yourself. But if your relationship at the moment is a little bit predictable, it's rather like a well-worn pair of slippers, try and do something completely different. And don't just sit back and expect your partner to be the one who prompts that spontaneity. Take the initiative. Once you put that spark in there, they may give a spark back. So there is a need for excitement at the moment and a lot more romance. I think you've been someone who's been so dedicated to the wider needs of others. And of course you do have Saturn still in your sector of work and health. So you need to continue to make some modifications in that area, I would think. But with Jupiter in your 7th house forging such a glittering link with Venus, Mars and Uranus and the Ascendant and the midpoint, I would say that this Valentine's Day for your sign is about as good as it gets. So if you haven't got someone in your world at the moment, that points towards you being a little bit more daring to try and to engender opportunities. Now for you, Libra, the event chart sees the Descendant and the position of Uranus in your 8th house. Very much about where we're most devoted. But of course Uranus is about freedom. So if you're devoted in a relationship that you feel trapped in, Uranus could push you to try to find the door marked exit. And with Venus and Mars, Venus your ruler, closely together in your 4th house, the emotional dimension of the relationship is so important at the moment. Saturn in the 5th is saying if you're dissatisfied from a romantic viewpoint, you will need to think about changing it. But equally, the 8th house could bring someone into your world in a very dynamic way. But if it is, I think there will be a lot of sexual charisma and energy and intensity around this person. You need to feel that sense of uplift and excitement. Because you can be on the surface implacable and very calm, and it seems like everything is working beautifully in your world, underneath that you can be rather like the swan, where your feet are paddling away frantically under the surface. Maybe you need to let go of some of that facade. I'm not saying it's fake, but just realize that your Descendant is Aries, which is about passion. The more you embrace that passion, the more you're going to bring amazing results into your situation. Now that brings us to Scorpio, and of course on this particular event the midpoint is in your 7th house along with Uranus and the Ascendant based on universal central time in your sign, and having that cluster of energy in your 3rd solar house including your 2 rulers means your words can carry so much force, not by being forceful, just because so much conviction. So don't underestimate how you can impact on people's senses, because you could make someone's pulse race really quickly. And in general, you're needing a degree of excitement. So maybe not one person is going to come into your world throughout the rest of this year. Maybe it's more than one person. If you're in a longer-standing relationship, how you live together is really the crux. If you tend to rub along pretty well, share tasks, give each other a little bit of space, I don't see a problem at all. But if that's more of a challenge, just being in close proximity to each other all the time, that could be something that you may find a little more challenging. So Sagittarius, you have the midpoint of this particular event in your 6th house, so it could be in the most mundane of locations. Over the next few years that you could connect with someone, you know, the school run, could be the supermarket queue, the fitness suite. Once people go back to work more, around that water cooler. But whatever you encounter in this regard, I think the values of the person you're drawn to are critically important because of all these planets on this event in the 2nd house. And Pluto's going to continue for a little while longer, through to 23, partially goes into your 3rd house, goes back into your 2nd. So for now, for the foreseeable future, connecting to people who understand your values, and also perhaps have a kind of approach to fitness, health, diet, nutrition that really marries with your own personal values in that regard. That is very, very important. Now, of course, Jupiter, your ruler, is also in your 4th house, forging a great link with Venus and Mars, and also with Uranus. So there may be an opportunity that's going to evolve in an existing relationship to remodel where you live or add to your family, and that can be a lovely magical opportunity in the months to come. Which brings us to Capricorn. Now, of course, having all that energy on your 5th house cusp, the point of romance, is absolutely superb. But on the other end of that axis is the 11th house for you, friendship. Is there a friend or someone in your circle, a friend of a friend, who is giving you some kind of signal, not necessarily a verbal signal? Perhaps it's just a hunch you have. But if you find yourself drawn towards someone who really does excite you, then perhaps that more cautionary side of your nature needs to be challenged by the fact that Pan, yes, the planet of desire, is in your sign, the 1st house of action, but also Mars and Venus, Pluto and Mercury. If ever there was a time when you were could be bolder to your advantage, it's now. And Jupiter is giving you a lot of skills to articulate whatever message, whether it's through a text, an email, a dating site, or even a conversation. You can skillfully cultivate who you are and put that across in a way that someone could be extraordinarily receptive to you around. You also have in this particular chart the North Node in your 5th house, your 5th solar house of romance, going to be here for about another 16, 17 months. So another opportunity for you in a romantic context for things to evolve. What about if you're in a relationship which is not really sparking you anymore? Well, that's the challenge for that part of you that does love security. If you prefer to stick with what you know because it makes you feel safe at some kind of level, the chances are it is going to starve the oxygen of joy or potential joy from you at another level. We can't necessarily get something we need by sticking partially, like, it's like anything in life. If we block that space up, we're not making ourselves truly available for the potential to flow through. But that means to really find true romantic or even great relationship or partnership connections, we have to be a bit more vulnerable. But if you want to be dynamic about your opportunities, then this event certainly gives you a big push in that direction. Now, Aquarius, of course, for you, this event occurs in your sign. 25 degrees Aquarius. which, as I mentioned before, is governed by the third decan of Aquarius, Venus. So in itself, that's a lovely place to have it. Jupiter, the planet of expansion and good fortune, in the second solar house. So if you want to spoil someone with a nice gesture, it's likely to be appreciated. But with that pack of energy in the 12th house, is your mind going back to someone from your past? Are you feeling nostalgic? It really wouldn't be a surprise, but that could be an opportunity to let go of a relationship which finished many moons ago, but still is very active in your emotions, because letting go frees up the space to bring someone new and fresh into your situation. And you can see that the part of fortune and also Black Moon Lilith are very close together in your 5th house. Maybe a little bit of a walk on the wild side, even with all that very vulnerable 12th house energy active in your situation, could engender some kind of new beginning or new possibility. But in general, with all that 4th house energy, I think it's important that if you're in an ongoing relationship, that you do have a sense of space, physical and emotional, but you can also come together in a very truthful, emotional way when you do need to be much more sharing of the more intimate parts of your feelings, not just the more sexual elements of life. Which brings us to Pisces. So last but definitely not least, so for you, a lot of excitement in the 3rd house. 3rd house is about buzzy, everyday energy. Chances are, therefore, you need to be stimulated in your mind. All the energy that's in the 11th house points towards groups, associations, friendships. Could be some kind of common interest or goal that you have, or aspiration or cause that you believe in, that can put you side by side someone who's going to invigorate you future forwards. But if you're in a relationship that isn't working very well, Saturn in your 12th house is kind of saying, are there some realities that you really need to confront about that relationship? And it may be that a friend can be a wise counsel to you, but think about your longer term future. If a tide that you're involved with now isn't really in your heart what you really need for the longer term future, by sticking with it, you're stealing an opportunity to bring someone to your side who really can be the right person for you. And that could be true even if you're no longer in a relationship, if you're still closely allied to how a relationship was in the past. If you can let go of the energies and the deep roots of that particular experience, it will freshen you up and make you available for another new wonderful experience. It's been a real pleasure being with you. Thank you so much for joining me for this special in-depth video. Take care. I hope you have a lovely day, and remember, if you're on your own, that means that you are in pole position to bring someone into your life. It's been thank you and goodbye.